Dad discovers an incredible retired police dog for sale. An unexpected transformation awaits. As Joe wandered through the local flea market, the voices around him faded into a dull hum. The vibrant colors and smiling faces felt distant, like a world he didn't belong to anymore. His thoughts weighed heavy, pulled down by grief for his wife and anxiety about his children. Just making it through the day had become a relentless, exhausting grind. He stifled a deep sigh, the sight of happy families stirring an ache in his chest. Then, a vendor waving a flyer caught his eye. Retired police dog for sale. Meet Rex. Joe hesitated, so many thoughts swirling in a storm inside him. A dog? Really? Couldn't he barely keep up with bills and the kids? Yet as he stared down at the flyer, an odd tug occurred within him. Something in those soulful brown eyes promised an answer, a companion in the darkness. But how could he even think of adopting a dog when he was already on the edge? He pushed the thought aside, grappling with the growing unrest in his heart. Was he just a foolish man looking for an escape? Could a dog ease the quiet loneliness of their home? The pressing silence between him and his kids made every decision feel monumental. Joe wasn't just haunted by his wife's absence, but by the growing rift between him and Ben and Emma. These walls felt like they were closing in. Ben was becoming a shadow, lost in video games and phone screens. Emma glanced at him sometimes, her eyes flickering with a mix of anger and hurt, as if she were still waiting for a punchline in a joke that never landed. They all needed healing, but could Joe really afford the responsibility of a dog? And deep down, did he even deserve to let anyone in? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. He clenched his fists, the uncertainty crashing over him like waves against the shore. The pressure was unbearable, rising from inside until it felt like a muscle twitch. He quickly turned away from the vendor, but those soulful eyes kept pulling him back, igniting a flicker of hope mingled with skepticism. Finally, with an unexpected surge of courage, Joe found himself back at the booth, signing papers that felt heavier than lead. Rex was coming home. His heart raced. Would this be the change they all needed, or another burden to bear? Could Rex bridge the gap between him and his kids, or would he merely highlight the chasm of loss? As he drove home, the tension coiled tighter around him. What if Rex didn't connect with Ben and Emma? What if he couldn't be the father they needed? At the same moment, a brutal realization hit him. External judgment was just around the corner. The affluent neighbors would surely voice their concerns about a single father struggling to raise two teenagers while trying to care for a retired police dog. The weight of their whispers cut through him, slicing at his dignity. What if Rex wasn't meant for them? Pulling into the driveway, the looming question of redemption, his own worthiness, hung heavy in the air. Doubt gripped him tight, but for the first time in a long while, perhaps the flicker of something like hope lit the corners of his heart. As the car engine finally died, he prepared to face his kids, not knowing what awaited him, but feeling an unshakable promise of change ahead. As Joe stepped out of the car, a knot of anxiety twisted in his stomach. The weight of the moment pressed down on him like a storm cloud ready to unleash rain. Rex, the dog he'd just committed to adopting, was depending on him. But more crucially, Ben and Emma were. They needed him to keep his promise, to be present, to lead, not just as their father, but as a man rediscovering life amidst chaos. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Visioning Rex bounding toward his kids, tail wagging, stirred a different kind of hope. Perhaps this could bridge the widening gulf between them, a shared project to do together. Joe's heart raced, and he opened the front door cautiously. Inside, silence greeted him, thick and oppressive. Ben's door was shut, a barrier to any interaction, while Emma sat slumped on the couch, a loose braid dangling over her shoulder like an unattended thread. Joe's throat constricted, the air heavy with unspoken resentment. "Hey kids," he called, projecting as much enthusiasm as he could muster through his wavering voice. "I brought home a surprise." Ben's door cracked open briefly but quickly slid back shut, while Emma merely raised an eyebrow. "What kind of surprise?" she asked, skepticism lacing her tone. Instead of engaging in explanations, Joe made the decision to walk right outside, leading Rex from the car. As the dog stepped onto the asphalt, a surge of confidence bloomed in Joe's chest. "Meet Rex," he announced, hoping the name itself would be enough to elicit a spark of curiosity. Rex stood there, a solid figure with eyes gleaming, and instinctively he approached Joe, tail wagging like the metronome of Joe's racing pulse. It took a few more steps before Emma finally peeked outside, curiosity overshadowing her initial apathy. "Is that a dog?" Emma asked, disbelief flickering across her face. Joe nodded, a hint of a smile trying to break free. "He's a retired police dog. I thought maybe he could help us all." "Help us with what?" Ben's voice came from behind his door again, still muted but cutting through the doubt like a sharp blade. "Help us heal," Joe found himself saying, the words flowing almost before he'd realized their meaning. "Help us bring a little laughter and life back into this place." There it was, the flicker of hope he'd felt earlier. Facing his children felt like staring into the abyss, yet with Rex by his side, perhaps he could summon the courage to leap forward, a newfound intent behind his words. Emma shifted her stance, finally pushing her braid behind her ear. "A dog isn't going to make everything better." "No, it won't," Joe admitted, taking a step closer to his daughter. "But it might just be a start, a way to share something, to take small steps together, as a family." He felt stirring underneath his resolve, the subtle reminder of what companionship could be, both for his children and for him. Rex, now walking calmly to Emma, stopped right at her feet, looking up with an expectant gaze as though he understood the weight of the moment. "See?" Joe pressed, pointing to Rex's inviting attitude. "If anything, he just wants to be part of it." The shift in their dynamics hung in the air, a delicate dance of hesitance and willingness. Joe's heart thundered in his chest as he watched Emma crouch down, tentative yet curious. There was a flicker in Ben's doorway too, a momentary shadow shifting within. But as the minutes passed, Joe realized this was just the beginning. Building trust where it had fractured seemed daunting. Rex was not merely a dog, but an incubator for their healing. Suddenly, the door swung open wider, and Ben stepped into the light, arms crossed over his chest. "Okay, but if you're going to keep him, you have to promise to take care of him too, because I'm not doing your work." Joe's smile faltered slightly, awareness washing over him. He was now tasked with teaching them about responsibility, his own past failures bubbling forth as he made an unsteady promise. "I will. Together we'll do this." As Rex took a clumsy step forward to nuzzle against Ben, a wave of hope washed over Joe, invigorating his spirit. But doubt began to creep in again. Could he truly guide them through the rough waters of recovery? The pathway ahead was uncertain, yet exhilarating, and Joe understood one thing profoundly. Each day would be a new decision, a test of resilience for their fragile family. Would they embrace the challenge, or would the ebb of grief continue to hold them captive? As he glanced back at Rex, Joe felt a swell of determination. The time had come to face not just the challenges that lay ahead, but the realities of his own feelings. Would he rise to meet them, or would he falter? With resolve hardening, he returned inside, knowing that each step carried potential. And just as he crossed the threshold, a fierce bark erupted from Rex, cutting through the tension like a booming drum. Instinctively, Joe felt something shift. But what new fears lay ahead, unsurfaced yet lurking in the shadows? Inside the house, the atmosphere grew heavy as Joe prepared for the delicate balance of urgency and calm. Rex, steadfast at his side, provided some comfort, but the looming shadows of doubt blended with the challenge of reconnecting with his children. It was a two-pronged battle, navigating his own grief while sparking a flicker of life back into Ben and Emma. "Come on, let's give Rex a tour around the yard," he urged, capturing their attention with a gentle, casual tone. He fostered a semblance of lightness, yet inside he felt the strain of attempting to orchestrate every interaction. Joe stepped forward, the dog following obediently, but he sensed his children hovering in hesitation. Emma rose slowly, and with tentative steps joined her father and Rex. She extended a hand as she got closer, allowing Rex to sniff. "What if he jumps on me?" she questioned, her voice a mix of caution and a whisper of hope. Joe smiled, recalling how the dog had been trained to respond to commands. "Rex, sit!" he called, his tone firm yet warm. To his relief, the dog complied without hesitation. Emma's eyes widened, and the faintest trace of a smile crept onto her lips. "Okay, maybe he's not so bad," she conceded, lightening the atmosphere. Meanwhile, Ben lingered at the doorframe, arms still crossed. His posture betrayed skepticism, a barrier still firmly in place. "What's he gonna do? Listen to you all day?" Joe took a steadying breath, empowering himself with that self-reflection. "No, he's not listening to me. He's part of our family now, and he needs all of us. This is about teamwork. That includes you." As he tossed a stick across the grass, Rex darted after it. The sheer joy of the chase sparked something latent within their dynamic. He could almost see Ben wrestle with his interest, a brief flicker beneath hardened resolve as he uncrossed his arms. "He's fast," Ben muttered, half impressed, half trying to maintain his facade of indifference. "Yeah, he's got some good skills. Just think of how much he can teach us, too," Joe offered, hoping his words might echo deeper. Dogs live in the moment. They don't dwell on the past. Instinctively, Rex returned the stick to Joe, curious eyes tracking back to the group. Joe shifted, heart buoyed by the small triumph. "Let's teach him some tricks together. What do you say?" The challenge called to them, and he couldn't help but picture the potential. Early mornings in the sun, laughter, and perhaps a more palpable connection amongst them. With a new direction set, Joe faced his children with newfound determination, feeling the weight of the moment shift. "But I'll need your help, both of you. It'll only work if we all pitch in." Emma exchanged glances with Ben, who appeared less resolute but clearly intrigued. The conversation had morphed subtly, unveiling cracks in their emotional barriers. "Fine," Ben allowed awkwardly, the challenge resonating with him. "But he better not ruin my room." A small victory for Joe nudged at his chest. A sense of purpose was igniting. He could feel the pull of possibility, like a distant shore drawing near. But even amidst this flicker of connection, the creeping doubt resurfaced. Was he truly capable of sustaining this sense of purpose? As they engaged Rex in a game, laughter cautiously reappearing, a firm realization struck Joe. This wasn't just about healing as a family, but redefining who he aimed to be. No easy feat. Himself, still tangled in grief, was simultaneously tasked with reshaping his children's world. What if they resented him for thrusting them into this chaotic journey? The day slipped into dusk, the sunlight casting long shadows in the yard where Rex now played, unaware of the emotional currents swirling around him. Each chuckle from Emma, or half smirk from Ben, drew Joe closer to a sense of determination. But just as he began to believe they were turning a corner, a sudden thought gripped him. Could they be ready for the deeper conversations about the past? The memories they were all desperately trying to avoid? The realization settled heavily within him. Would he be ready and willing to face that fear? Or would this newfound path with Rex ultimately lead them into even murkier waters? His heart wavered, yet there was no denying that they were beginning to forge something important. But at what cost? With uncertainty looming overhead, the prospect of vulnerability swallowed Joe whole. And just as he contemplated the next steps ahead, Rex's bark broke through again, sending a shiver through him as the dog paused, sensing something unspoken ahead. What hidden truths might emerge next, and would Joe summon the courage to confront them? As the last rays of sun dipped behind the horizon, Joe's heart was heavy with the dual weight of longing and resolve. The laughter from Emma and Ben dimmed, replaced by deepening shadows that stretched across the yard. Rex, oblivious to the complexities swirling in Joe's mind, presented a cheerful distraction, yet the sense of urgency lingered. The time had come to bridge the gap between their laughter and the silent grief that hovered like a specter. Steeling himself, Joe turned to his children, the dog momentarily forgotten. "All right, team," he started, aiming to capture their attention again. "Before we dive into tricks, let's talk. Not the kind where Dad talks and you listen. I want to hear from you too." Ben rolled his eyes but said nothing. Emma fidgeted with the hem of her shirt, braving the silence that wrapped around them. It was palpable. Joe pushed forward, desperate to cut through the unease. "Rex is a reminder of teamwork," he said, choosing his words as carefully as a tightrope walker places their feet. "But being a family is about more than just sharing chores. It's sharing our feelings too. I know this is hard, but we've all felt something significant slip away. I want to know how you both are doing since—" Joe swallowed hard, the word "since" hanging between them like a gaping chasm. Emma's gaze flicked to the ground, while Ben leaned back against the patio door, arms crossed again. But as silence stretched on, Joe found a flicker of resolve. "Remember how I used to say you could talk to me about anything? That hasn't changed." He noted the skepticism written on Ben's face and the uncertainty etched across Emma's. "Let's try this. How about we share just one thing we miss?" The proposition hung in the air, a gentle challenge. He hoped it would backtrack the emotional walls both children had erected. "Think about it," he urged softly. "Those memories don't have to hurt. We can honor them." Emma hesitated, finally whispering, "I miss playing soccer with Mom. She always cheered the loudest." Joe felt a tightening in his chest, the tenderness of shared memories mingling with sorrow. He nodded, understanding blooming between them like wildflowers after a storm. Then a reluctant voice broke free. "I miss the weekend trips," Ben admitted, his bravado melting under the vulnerability. "We went everywhere. I didn't think—" He paused, wrestling with the emotions that surfaced. Joe's heart swelled with empathy, realizing they were slowly peeling back layers of pain. "Me too," Joe replied, his sincerity grounding them. Those moments were precious. A glimmer of understanding passed among them. Rex, sensing the shift, wandered closer, nudging at Ben's feet. A shared smile flickered between the children, and for the first time, Joe felt the slivers of connection re-emerge. They were finding a language of loss together, and in that language, glimmers of hope began to sprout. Joe felt the urge to confront the deeper truths. He no longer wanted to sidestep the past. Yet fear curled around him. What if bursting that bubble of shared grief exposed an emotional minefield? "I think we can make new memories with Rex," he proposed, voice trembling with cautious optimism. "We can bring back family weekends, adventures in new parks, get the old travel blog running again, as a family." Ben's intrigue was impossible to ignore, and a flicker of excitement sparked in Emma's eyes. But just as the atmosphere thickened with new possibilities, fear clawed at Joe's thoughts. Was he asking too much? Would they embrace this messy journey forward, or retreat into the safety of silence? Before Joe could explore that thought any further, Rex bounded ahead, his playful barks cutting through the tension. Joe noted how the simple joy radiating from the dog provided a much-needed balance to the complexity of their emotions. In that moment, amidst the echoes of their lost laughter, and hope glinting through uncertainty, the question loomed large again. Could they eventually confront not just the memories of joy, but also the weight of loss? As Joe watched his children's faces soften with newfound potential, he realized the next hurdle was just around the bend. Confrontation awaited, a reckoning with their shared grief that couldn't be postponed forever. What would it take to guide them from shared stories to the raw, unvarnished truths waiting in the shadows? And as Joe prepared for what lay ahead, the strumming dread of his own resolve surged once more. Would he find the courage to lead his family into the deeper waters of their shared pain, and perhaps find healing along the way? The next morning, the air was thick with the promise of change. Joe stood in the kitchen, a cup of coffee warming his hands, his mind racing through the conversations from the night before. The realities of loss weighed heavily on him, yet he was fueled by the glimmers of hope he had seen on Emma and Ben's faces, It was a new dawn, not merely in the sky but in the depths of their family journey. As he stirred the coffee, memories swept over him. Weekend trips to the lake, Emma's laughter as she splashed around, and Ben trying to impress his mother with his latest soccer trick. Those moments felt far away, yet so close, as if they were just waiting to be reconjured. They needed to forge ahead. The tide had turned, and he could no longer afford the luxury of drifting. Within moments, Ben and Emma shuffled into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from their eyes. Ben inherited Joe's reluctant demeanor, folding his arms across his chest while Emma, always the eager one, pulled up a chair. This was the moment Joe had to cultivate, to reinforce the fragile connections the night before had started to establish. "Hey, you two," Joe began, the encouragement rising in his voice. "I was thinking, what if today we went for a walk with Rex? Maybe a new park? It could be our first adventure together in a long time. I'd love to hear what parks you remember." Ben's brow furrowed, his skepticism re-emerging like an unwelcome guest. "What's the point? We could just sit here and watch TV." Joe felt a rush of disappointment, but quickly retracted, the urgency of the position overwhelming him. "This can be about more than just a walk. It's a chance for us to reconnect. We could find new favorite spots together, maybe pack a picnic." He noticed the subtle shift in Emma. Her eyes were cast upward, intrigued. "Fine," Ben relented, albeit begrudgingly. "I guess I could throw the ball for Rex." Taking the commitment, however small, as a win, Joe felt a faint hope burgeoning. They prepared, gathering sandwiches, fruit, and treats for Rex. Every item felt like an act of defiance against the silence that had long overshadowed their family. As they stepped into the sunlight, the world erupted in vibrant colors. Yet, even in the brightness, Joe sensed the atmosphere was still thick with lingering grief. They arrived at the park, a untamed maze of surroundings responsible for so many family memories, and circled back to the task he had set. A conversation, a recognition of the unspoken. After settling on a patch of grass, he initiated again. "What's something you'd like to add to our new adventures together?" Emma hesitated, her fingers fiddling with the sandwich wrapper. "I don't want it to feel forced, like it's..." Her voice trailed off, a delicate dance of emotions backing her every thought. Joe leaned in closer, careful not to impose. "We don't have to pretend everything is perfect, Em. Just share whatever's on your mind." Ben shifted uncomfortably, his gaze directed at the horizon, avoiding any acknowledgement of the burgeoning tension. "I miss Mom. I wish..." Emma started, and Joe felt the air constrict equally in his heart. "Me too." The admission slipped through Joe's lips before he could catch it. Silence followed, heavy and pregnant with unexpressed words. With sudden lucidity, Joe recognized the internal walls each of them had been building. The desire for connection was there. All they needed was acknowledgement. "What if we did something memorable this summer?" Joe interjected. "Something that honors her, like a family trip somewhere she loved. Or we could volunteer at a shelter. She always talked about community care." Ben's expression softened slightly. "That's a cool idea." Hope ignited anew inside Joe. Perhaps the quieter moments were where confrontation could yield resilience. They could carry forward the love that filled the cracks of their shared grief, nurturing new memories while cherishing old ones. But as the shadows of the day lengthened, Joe recognized that they hadn't crossed the pivotal emotional thresholds yet. Stepping into the deepest, raw emotions of grief, or confronting the fear of losing what they had still. How were they to face that denominator of loss that had been unacknowledged for too long? Joe's heart raced with an impending realization. What if recognizing that devastation was necessary for true healing? As they returned home, the journey felt painfully imminent. A tunnel without light just beyond sight. Confrontation awaited, and with it, the courage that Joe was beginning to muster would be put to the test. Could he embrace the fears surrounding the depth of his and his children's unresolved pain as they prepared to dive deeper? The next day dawned with a mix of exhilaration and unease for Joe. The remnants of their park outing lingered in his mind like a persistent melody, reflecting the fragile new direction of their family dynamic. As he stood at the front door, watching Ben and Emma head off to school, he felt a surge of responsibility to keep the momentum moving forward. They needed something to rally around, a central focus that could bridge the gaps of silence that frequently surfaced. Once the kids were gone, Joe was left with the clutter of the house, the reminders of lives that felt almost foreign, untouched since their loss. He took a deep breath, allowing determination to wash over him. It wasn't enough to revisit the past. They needed hope for the future. He recalled Emma's interest in animals, a deep-seated passion that might have been buried but never extinguished. He pulled out his laptop, the screen flickering to life as he typed in local shelters and dog adoption. The page flicked through images of rescued dogs, each one more pitiful than the last, their eyes pleading for homes. One photograph caught his eye, a scruffy golden retriever mix, graying at the snout with a watchful, wise expression. The caption read, "Retired police dog ready for a loving home." In that moment, Joe felt a flicker of possibility ignite within him. This could be the spark they needed. A dog could offer comfort, companionship, and even lead to valuable discussions about loyalty, hope, and healing. Values he desperately wanted to reinforce in his children. After a quick conversation with the shelter, he arranged to meet the dog later that afternoon. As he drove there, Joe's thoughts drifted toward Emma and Ben. They had been navigating their emotions like ships in a storm. Perhaps this dog could help anchor them, guiding them toward calmer waters. Upon arriving at the shelter, he was met with the soft whimpering sounds of dogs longing for love. He found the golden retriever mix waiting, looking both relieved and hopeful as Joe approached. There was something magnetic about the dog. He exuded a calmness that felt disarming. Joe crouched down, allowing the dog to sniff him. It felt like a silent handshake of trust, and he could already envision Emma and Ben's reactions. Back at home, he prepared dinner, heart racing as the minutes ticked down toward the kids' return. Their chatter filled the house, yet the usual placid routine felt charged with anticipation. "Dad?" Emma's voice broke through. "What's going on? You look different." "You'll see," Joe replied, biting back a grin. When they were at the table, the conversation skated over safe surface topics, their day at school, upcoming projects. But Joe was treading deeper waters. He wanted to shift the focus, to give them something fresh to discuss, a structure around a shared experience that wasn't merely rooted in grief. After dinner, Joe cleared his throat and spoke. "How would you two feel about adopting a dog?" Ben frowned, skepticism knitting his brow. "Why would we get a dog now? Isn't that a lot of work?" "But Ben," Emma chimed in, "having a dog would be awesome. I mean, we'd have someone to play with. What kind of dog?" Joe felt energy surge within him as he continued tentatively. "A retired police dog. He could help us, teach us about loyalty and healing. Maybe he could ease some of the loss," Ben interjected instinctively. Joe nodded, the clarity of his intention strengthening his resolve. "He could help us face that." Emma's eyes sparkled with curiosity, a spark he hadn't seen in a long time. "Can we meet him?" "Tomorrow," Joe said, heart pounding with the thrill of his plan taking shape. "Let's make a family adventure out of it." The prospect of having a dog lit a new fire within them, replacing the heavy shadows of sorrow with a flickering possibility of renewal. Joe could see them shifting, Emma whispering excitement to herself as they envisioned what tomorrow could hold. As night settled, and silence hung over the house like a comforting blanket, Joe realized that they were on the brink of something profound. They were confronting their fears, not only by adopting a dog, but by choosing to reinterpret their narrative, transforming their shared grief into an opportunity for growth. But as he settled into bed that night, anticipation washed over him with a wave of anxiety. Would this dog truly be the key to unlocking deeper conversations? Was he asking too much from his kids too quickly? The path ahead shimmered with potential, yet the shadows of doubt loomed ominously. Tomorrow would reveal if this leap of faith would lead them into light or further into their grief. As the door of possibilities swung open, Joe braced himself for what awaited them on the other side. What kind of transformations would this new chapter invite, and what hidden fears would they still need to confront? The next morning, rays of early sunlight filtered through the curtains, splashing soft light against the kitchen walls. Joe stirred, his heart still pulsing with the excitement and trepidation from the night before. He flipped over and glanced at the empty space beside him, a void that had grown too familiar, too painful. As he prepared breakfast, he mulled over his plan. The idea of adopting a dog was more than just about companionship. It was about creating a shared mission for Emma, Ben, and himself. In a world that felt perpetually disjointed, this could be their rallying point. Yet beneath his enthusiasm lay a gnawing concern. Would Emma be able to open up to the dog, and would Ben accept this shift? "Good morning," Emma's voice piped up cheerily as she bounded into the kitchen, her hair tousled but her spirited demeanor shining through. The typical morning chaos began to unfurl, and Joe felt a flicker of hope. "Morning. You ready for our adventure today?" he asked, attempting to channel palpable excitement. Emma grabbed her cereal and returned a smile that made Joe's heart swell. "I can't wait to see him." Ben stumbled in moments later, still half asleep and skeptical. With a yawn, he mumbled, "Do we really have to do this, Dad?" Joe paused, gauging his son's mood with care. "It's not just about getting a dog, Ben. It's about bringing something into our lives that can help us heal. Remember how we talked about facing things together?" Ben shrugged, but Joe caught a glimpse of interest beneath his doubt. As they finished breakfast, he resolved to make this a day of discovery, not only about the dog, but about each other. When they arrived at the shelter, the familiar cacophony of barking greeted them. As Joe pushed open the gate, he felt the usual anxiety replaced by a sense of purpose. He wanted this to be a day of connection, a moment when they could confront their grief while nurturing something new. The staff led them to the dog area, and when the golden retriever mix ambled into view, Joe's heart quickened. The dog approached with a gentle gait, sniffing the air before settling next to Joe, as if sensing his need for reassurance. He was more than just an animal. He radiated a quiet strength. "Meet Ace," the shelter attendant said, kneeling to draw the dog's attention. "He's got a calm demeanor and loves children. He was trained to protect, but now he just wants a family to love." Joe watched as Emma knelt beside Ace, her fingers sifting through his fur. A smile cracked across her face, a true smile that illuminated her eyes. "He's perfect, Dad." "No, he's not just perfect," Joe interjected, the weight of how significant this moment felt pressing against him. "He represents a new beginning." Ben stood at a distance, arms crossed, watching intently. Joe was aware of the wall his son had built, a defensive stance he revered for its safety, but desperately wished to dismantle. "Want to try petting him, Benny?" Joe ventured, hoping to bridge the gap. "Perhaps he's too big," Ben replied, hesitating. As Ace leaned into Emma, his gentle nature was undeniable. "He's a softie, I promise," Joe said, nudging his son gently. "Just give him a chance." Ben shifted, his eyes shifting between the dog and Emma's wide smile. Joe could see the wheels turning in his head, contemplating not just Ace but the idea of lowering his guard just a bit. Minutes passed, and then Ben moved closer. Tentatively, he reached out, allowing the dog to nuzzle against him. The moment felt electric, a slight crack forming in the stronghold of sorrow that had gripped their lives. Joe felt the weight of fear lift, replaced by burgeoning connection. "What do you think, Ben?" Joe pressed, though he felt nervous. "I think he's not bad," Ben said, surprising himself with the admission. Joe's heart raced as he felt the shift occurring. An opening, a chance for dialogue, for healing. "Let's take him for a walk," he proposed, heart pounding with anticipation. As they strolled with Ace, laughter echoed amidst the clinking of the leash. More than just a dog was emerging in this daylight. There was a new story taking shape, a narrative where reconnection and resolution could flourish. But as they prepared to leave the shelter, the shadows of their grief were ever present, a reminder that deeper conversations still lay ahead. Joe could feel a stirring inner conflict, one that pulled at the core of his emotional readiness. How much could Ace truly help them face the demons of their past? Just before leaving, Joe noticed a small sign near the exit that read, "Adopt, don't shop." Yet in that moment, the question loomed larger. How would they adopt, not just Ace, but the new life he symbolized? What would it take for them to embrace their transformation fully? As they drove away with Ace in the back seat, Joe felt a sense of urgency washing over him. The road was long, but would it be enough to carry them through to the other side? Immediately, he sensed the requisite challenges ahead, challenges that could manifest with even greater intensity than the ones they had already begun to confront. The following morning dawned with a heavy looming cloud, a stark contrast to the excitement of the previous day. Joe awoke with a persistent sense of introspection. It wasn't just about Ace anymore. It was about how this new addition would redefine their family dynamics, a task more daunting than he anticipated. He brewed coffee and looked out the window, watching as Ace lay curled up on the living room rug. The dog appeared serene, blissfully unaware of the emotional intricacies swirling around him. Yet, in that stillness, Joe found himself battling questions about their next steps. How did one foster an environment where grief could coexist alongside healing? How did he encourage Ben and Emma to embrace change without forcing it upon them? "Dad?" Emma's voice broke his concentration, her appearance in the kitchen a gentle reminder of their new reality. "Can I walk Ace today?" "Of course," Joe replied, surprised by her eagerness. "Want me to join you?" Her face lit up. "Yes, it'll be fun." As they stepped outside, the autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, a comforting sound that promised new adventures. They strolled through the neighborhood, Ace leading them, his tail wagging in enthusiastic arcs. Emma let out a giggle as Ace sniffed around, his curiosity igniting her laughter like a spark. Joe watched them, a sensation of warmth flooding through him, but it was quickly replaced by a stab of anxiety. He had seen how quickly moments of joy could be overshadowed by their past. What challenges would arise now, he pondered. After their walk, they returned home and settled into a routine with Ace. Ben, though still cautious, began helping with feeding and grooming. Each small task performed together allowed Joe a glimpse into Ben's vulnerability. He'd catch Ben gently tossing a toy, then flushing with surprise when Ace eagerly retrieved it, tail wagging wildly. It was these fragmented interactions that sparked deep reflections within Joe about resilience. One evening, as they prepared dinner, Joe noticed Ben retreating to his room after failing to connect with Ace during an earnest play session. His heart ached. That familiar wall Ben had constructed rose defiantly. It's time for a challenge, Joe thought. The kind he'd been avoiding since Emma and Ben's mother had passed, one that demanded confrontation. Later that week, Joe decided to shift their family routine into something more purposeful. He planned a training session for Ace and invited Ben to be part of it. "We can teach him new tricks," Joe proposed, hoping to rally Ben's partnership. To Joe's surprise, Ben was reluctant but curious. The training session commenced in the backyard, filled with hopeful energy. Ace responded well to their commands, yet Ben hung back, hesitating between engaging with the dog and retreating into his solitude. "Come on, buddy," Joe encouraged as Ben interjected with awkward attempts at commands, his voice battling against layers of uncertainty. "You can do this. Just show Ace you're in charge, and he will listen." A fierce determination stirred within Joe. He recognized that if he wanted Ben and Emma to heal, he couldn't let fear dictate the pace of their journey. Each moment untried was an opportunity for growth that he couldn't afford to squander. "How can I guide them through this transformation?" he questioned silently, feeling the weight of responsibility. Suddenly Ben called out with uncharacteristic assertiveness, "Ace, sit." The dog obeyed, and in that brief exchange, a spark ignited in Ben's expression. Joe observed the confidence blooming, a flicker of connection forming between the two. Excitement surged through Joe as he realized the potential growing within their dynamic. Perhaps this was the catalyst they needed to integrate tender discussions about their past, strengthening their bond with humor and mutual support through Ace. But that night, after the laughter and training had settled, a troubling thought crept back into Joe's mind. Is a dog enough to fill the void? Would Ace merely be a distraction in their continuous battle against grief? As he lay in bed, he wondered if they were avoiding the deeper conversations, the ones that could lead to true healing. Just as doubt began to tangle itself around him, he received a message from the shelter about a retired police dog. This dog could offer a different type of companionship. The note read, igniting curiosity and uncertainty alike. Could this potentially be the next step in their journey? Would Ben and Emma be ready for something more significant? Or was this another endeavor destined to unravel? With a racing heart, Joe sat up and flipped on his light, feeling an urgency stir within. The time had come to face another decision that could redefine the future of their family. Joe sat at the edge of his bed, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and dread. The message continued to flicker on his phone, a beacon of opportunity laced with uncertainty. A retired police dog could bring a new depth to Ace's companionship, but also posed a myriad of challenges. Joe felt the weight of potential responsibilities pressing down like the dreary clouds outside. He could almost hear the conversations that would play out, the questions from Ben and Emma, the uncertainty in their eyes. How would they react to another dog? A creature trained for awareness, potentially equipped to sense emotions and traumas. He had to think carefully. Before he could spiral into his worries, he grabbed his phone and texted the shelter back, expressing interest in learning more about the retired police dog. I need to take control of this situation before it spirals out of hand, he reminded himself. It felt pivotal. This could either forge a deeper bond within their family or break any fragile connections they had begun to rebuild. The next day, as if the universe was responding to his decision, Joe found himself walking through the shelter's doors. The scent of animals and cleaning products filled the air, only heightened by the underlying scent of hope. He scanned the room, feeling pulses of nervous energy ripple through him as he whispered a quick motivational note to himself. Just observe. Be open. A staff member approached, smiling warmly as she guided him to a small, enclosed area. He's in here, she said, gesturing towards a large dog with a thick, muscular build, his coat a striking blend of black and tan. This was Max, the retired police dog, his demeanor calm yet alert, eyes surveying the room like a seasoned veteran. Joe felt an immediate tug at his heart. As he knelt to greet Max, he felt an unexpected surge of connection. This was not just an animal. He was a creature shaped by experience, trained to protect and read cues. You've seen some things, haven't you? Joe murmured, stroking the dog's fur, feeling it warm beneath his fingertips. He wondered how Max might understand the turbulence they all carried within. The shelter staff explained Max's history, his successful career in service, his training in emotional support, and his gentle temperament. The more she spoke, the more Joe's desire to bring Max home transformed from a whimsical thought into a defined goal. Would this be the transformative catalyst our family needs? He pondered, absorbing each detail. During their conversation, she mentioned that Max had been used in therapy programs, aiding those dealing with loss and trauma. He could help you and your kids, she added. Joe's thoughts collided. What if Max wasn't just a new family member, but a bridge to understanding their collective grief? His internal dialogue twisted between skepticism and hope. He longed for a solution that embraced their past while propelling them into a renewed future. Once back home, he gathered the kids to discuss this potential new addition. Their reactions oscillated between excitement and apprehension. Emma's eyes sparkled, while Ben retreated into silence, his discernment evident. What if he disrupts the comfort we've built? Ben finally asked, vulnerability bleeding through his cautious tone. Then we'll face it together, Joe replied, hoping his words resonated with honesty. Emotions swirled around the conversation like autumn leaves whipped in the wind. It was crucial for them to acknowledge both their fears and their hopes. The family's discussion opened up deeper issues surrounding trust and the fears of upheaval. Joe's heart sank and soared simultaneously. He didn't just want to insert Max into their lives. He desired a united front against their lingering sorrow. That evening, as they tried to absorb the impact of the day, Joe took a moment for himself. His thoughts wrapped tightly around the idea of change. Could this journey with Max lead to the candid conversations he had long avoided? Was he prepared for the emotions this endeavor would unearth? Before sleep claimed him, he found himself staring at the ceiling, wondering if bringing Max into their dynamic meant unraveling what little security they had established. Is the risk of pain worth the potential for healing? He questioned, his mind racing. Tomorrow would reveal the answers he sought, and he was acutely aware that he stood at a crossroad. Would he embrace the uncertainty, or would the fear of deeper wounds keep him anchored to familiarity? As he closed his eyes, one thought lingered. The path ahead was tangled with complexity, but perhaps complexity was necessary for growth. A decision loomed, and Joe knew it couldn't wait. The moment arrived when he had to step into the unknown. The question was, how far was he willing to go for his family's healing? The sun streamed through the room, illuminating the scattered remnants of the previous day's conversation. Joe stood in the kitchen, the weight of the decision to adopt Max pressing heavily on him. Each tick of the clock reminded him that the moment for action was upon them. Today was about more than just bringing home another dog. It was about fortifying their family's fragile sense of unity. As he poured his coffee, Joe glanced toward the living room. There, Ace lay peacefully, a symbol of the progress they had already made. Emma joined him, her eyes bright with anticipation, yet still clouded by uncertainty. "What about Max, Dad? Can we meet him today?" she asked, enthusiasm bubbling through her words. "Yes, we can," Joe replied, steadying his resolve. "But first, I want us all to talk about it. This decision affects everyone, and I need to know what you both feel." Before they ventured out, Joe gathered Ben, who was still wrestling with skepticism. The three of them sat at the table, Ace nearby, panting softly, as if sensing the emotional gravity of the conversation. "Max is different from Ace," Joe began, his voice steady as he locked eyes with his children. "He can help us in ways we might not fully understand yet. He's trained to support people who are dealing with loss, like us. But if we bring him home, it means more responsibility." Emma nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "I think we could use that help, but are we ready?" Ben, arms crossed, wore an expression of doubt. "What if it doesn't work out? What if we can't handle 2 dogs?" "I get your concerns, and I promise we'll take this step at a time," Joe reassured him. "But we can't let fear dictate our choices. We've already started healing with Ace, and Max could help us heal even more. Sometimes blending the old with the new can be the best way forward." Silence settled around the table as they considered his words. Then Emma broke it. "I want to meet him. I think it's important." Ben hesitated before finally admitting, "Yeah, I think it could be worth trying too. But, Dad, if Max doesn't fit in..." "If he doesn't, we will figure it out together," Joe responded, his heart swelling with renewed hope. He felt the validation of his words, an understanding that while the journey with grief was uncertain, it was one they could navigate as a family. After their discussion, driving to the shelter felt different. Joe's heart raced, not just with nerves but anticipation. They arrived, and as they stepped inside, the familiar chorus of barks welcomed them warmly. When they approached Max's enclosure, Joe's breath caught in his throat. The dog's presence was commanding yet inviting, a combination that made Joe feel an immediate affinity. He knelt down, extending a hand, allowing Max to sniff him. The instant connection was palpable, and Joe saw Emma's excitement ignite. "Can I take him out?" she asked almost breathlessly. "Absolutely," Joe said, stepping back as she approached Max with a gentleness that made his heart swell. He felt like the moment was significant. Max could be a spark, a catalyst that would guide them into deeper connections. As Max came outside, it was like the air shifted. The atmosphere transitioned from cautious to charged, and Joe observed as Emma's laughter floated through the air. Max responded eagerly, playfully nipping at the grass and chasing after leaves. Joe felt an overwhelming tide of hope, Laughter echoed around him, looping them all together with visceral bonds. "See, he's fun!" Emma exclaimed, delighting in Max's antics. Amidst the joy, Joe noticed Ben standing back, his arms rigid, but with curiosity sparkling in his eyes. "Why don't you try playing with him, Ben?" Joe prompted gently, taking a measured step toward him. Ben shuffled forward, hesitantly extending his hand. Joe could sense the trepidation in his son, but it was accompanied by a flicker of resolve. Max approached slowly, assessing him, and that moment felt monumental. "Just throw the ball," Joe encouraged. With a deep breath, Ben flung the ball across the yard. Max darted after it, retrieving it with a joyful bark that sent waves of laughter through their entire family. Watching Ben break a smile was intoxicating. Each throw dissolved another layer of his son's guardedness. Minutes turned into hours as they played together, a familial reconnecting that felt effortless yet profound. Joe felt himself soaking up this moment, the shared laughter, the warmth of their collective effort. They were not just adopting a dog, they were inviting growth, resilience, and connection back into their home. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue upon their faces, Joe knew they had crossed another threshold. There would be more conversations to be had, deeper feelings to explore, and challenges to confront. But as he looked at his children, light splashed across their features, he also sensed an undeniable shift, an energy of belonging, of unearthing further understanding amidst their complexities. Arriving back home, they gathered in the living room with Max wagging his tail, settled into a new and renewed rhythm. The uncertainty still lurked, but Joe felt fortified by the knowledge that the journey ahead was not to face alone. Instead, they were embarking on it together. "All right, family," Joe said, a grin stretching across his face. "Welcome Max to our home, and let's make sure each day is about sharing, growing, and healing." The door to possibility stood wide open, and Joe felt an exhilarating rush of optimism sparkle within him. Stepping forward, he understood that this was the moment of commitment, not just to Max, but to one another. They would learn, adapt, and grow together, and that was the crux of transformation. It was not solely about recovering from loss, but also about discovering new depths of joy, and perhaps finding themselves along the way. The journey would continue, and Joe felt an unshakable confidence building within, a clarity to guide his children and navigate the complexities ahead. This family was not merely surviving. They were rising to meet life's challenges, armed with the love they had for one another, and the promise of healing love through the presence of Max. Now more than ever, it was time to embrace change, share their vulnerabilities, and forge deeper connections in their lives. And with that thought echoing in his mind, Joe smiled and moved forward, ready to face whatever would come next, together. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about how this ends. The discussion matters. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait, even one more second, to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.